Hi everyone, just before we start, can I ask if everyone at the back can see the screen okay? It's not too bright with the lights? Everything all right? We just want to get it right, you know. Okay, no one has a problem with the lights behind? Can see it all. Okay, if there's a problem, tell us during the way. We can dim some of the backlights. I think we'll start. Well, good evening. It's lovely to see you all. So I'm Jeanette Byrne, also known as Jeanette Brazel, the Deputy Chair of the Howth Peninsula Heritage Society. Obviously, this evening's guest is no stranger to me. I've known him all his life. He's my little brother. I'm just going to give a little bit of background to tonight's talk. I also want to welcome our global audience tonight who have dialed in and are watching on the St. Mary's link. So hi to all the friends, the UK, France, and across the world who wanted to watch this wonderful lecture tonight. So hi everyone. No pressure, Paul. No pressure, Paul. I don't think he'll speak to me after tonight for forcing him to come along and talk. So just a little bit of background. So as Philip mentioned, we have been involved in different heritage projects with Fingal, and in 2023 Philip thought that we should do something on the music heritage of Howth. So we put together a presentation and it was on display at Heritage Week. But on working on that project, a few of us realised that there was such a huge expanse of talent of varying natures in Howth over the years. And I also got information from Paul, which was just too much to include. So when we were looking at the schedule for talks for this year, last year scheduling, we just thought Howth has such a wonderful musical heritage that we should actually do something about it. And of course, we decided Paul was the guy to present it, seeing as though he's been linked in with so many bands, musicians here in Howth since we moved here in 1976. 76, yep. Yep, we were all babies. So that's what the background is. On discussion with Paul, we decided to just bring it down a little bit from all the musicians. We have the wonderful heritage with Leo Rickard, Barney McKenna, John Sheehan, and the traditional musicians, the Abbey Tavern sessions. Paul's expertise is really the rock area, and this was the title he has come up with, how Howth was at the forefront of the new wave music after the punk revolution of 1977. And it's really an interesting concept when you look at the links or the sort of the genetic music tree that he put together. We called it Howth Rocks, and then someone said to me, I didn't know Paul was a geologist, but we do have a pastime of looking at rocks in places we look at, but no, this was about the rock music and the rock history here of Howth. So, Paul has performed and recorded with lots of bands on big stages and worked with many of the musicians in Howth from the late 70s who rode the crest of this new wave. It's quite extraordinary how many of them went on to become major players in music and TV in Ireland and across the world. As Paul says, moving to Howth in 1976 changed the course of his life and career. And that is really an interesting thing to look at over the night, with how the move we made to here changed, and how possibly it mightn't have happened, or certainly for him, if we hadn't been here. So without further ado, my little brother, Paul Byrne in Tuanua, and many other incarnations.
Hi folks, welcome everybody here, welcome people online. So, yeah, I suppose when you're following up that, like what made a bunch of middle-class kids go into the arts and forego any chance of ever having a steady income. Because I was a really studious kid. I got all the honours, I went into veterinary, but I gave it up to ride this wave. So maybe tonight we can figure it out. So, I'm going to bring you on a little journey. These are the bands I'm talking about tonight. So you've got Sounds Unreal, who became Def Actor. You've the Modulators, who became Yeah Yeah. The Fast Skirts, Revaille, but they always call themselves Revaille for some reason. The Dark, who became The Spies, and Rocky de Valera and the Gravediggers. So, 1976 we moved here to Balscadden Road, and on the cliff, and I had a little porthole window that faced across the bay to the Asgard, and in those days there was rock gigs on Sunday nights in the Asgard, and I couldn't get to sleep because I heard the tum, tum, tum. I'd be trying to work out, you could only hear the bass line, I'd be trying to work out what the song was. But my folks lived in London in the 60s. They partied, and a lot of you know, they liked to party. So they went along, and I was struggling with, I think I had a snare drum, and I was playing in a big show after Christmas, and I had no real drum kit. And my dad came home on Christmas Eve, and he had done a deal with the drummer from the band in the Asgard. So this is where it all started, with an old Pearl drum kit. So having a place to rehearse is the first thing every band needs. So I was very lucky. My dad bought this cottage nearby, and the first 3 bands I was in all got to rehearse there when it was in between rentals, you know. And I've just seen Mogga Hearn is here. When this was rented out, then we moved up to the stable in Mogga Hearn's house up the road, and we must have spent well over a year up there, Mog, did we? So that was a great start for me and the bands. Does anybody know who this guy is? Cecil. Yeah. Thanks, Peter. You probably took the photograph, did you? So, yeah, that's Cecil from the Grove. So that was the other thing about Howth, was that most of us anyway, went to the Grove, which it was alternative music. You weren't listening to ABBA. You were listening to Led Zeppelin and stuff like that. But Cecil was quite progressive, and while he was kind of stuck in the early 70s, he did start bringing in stuff like Talking Heads. First place I heard Psycho Killer was in the Grove, which went straight into the first set of my first band. And he kind of embraced punk eventually, but not at the start. I remember going there around 1980 and heard The Clash, and they'd been out for about 3 or 4 years at this point. But plus he wanted to keep the punks out, I think, because there was a bit of a clash between the rockers and the punks. So there's a picture from the Grove, but it's not me and it's not Jerry Leonard, but it really does look like, it just looks incredibly like the two of us. It's mad. So the reason I mentioned the Grove as well is because I was walking in one night with my girlfriend, and this guy overheard me talking about drums, and he said, "Are you a drummer?" And I said, "Yeah." His name was Alan Scott. He was from Collins Avenue, and he just put a band together called Mercury. They weren't as heavy as you think. And it was the first band I joined. I think it was 15. And again, we had the cottage to jam in. And we did sort of Lizzie covers and AC/DC. We did a few originals as well. So our biggest show was this. Does anybody remember the peace concerts in the Phoenix Park? The legalised cannabis campaigner, Uwe Dwyer, back in the 70s. So anyway, on the first day, we got to play, and at the end of the day, he had these Hells Angels as security, and the PA company didn't get paid, so they wanted to be paid there and then. So Ubi got his Hells Angels, and they ended up having a big fight. Ubi was hauled off in a police wagon. So we came back the next day, and a band from Derry called the Outcasts, who are still going, by the way, still sort of one of the trailblazing punk bands from the north. They played, and they put out their guitar amps and said we could plug the mics into that, which sounded like this. You know, it was horrible sound. But and the other thing was, if they were using their gear, they got to play twice. So the reason I mentioned this gig is because this guy turned up. He was in a band called U2, or maybe they were called Feedback at the time, and they had pulled out of the show, but he wanted to do it. So even though he couldn't do it, he came along to help, and he ended up carrying my drums, setting them up with me, and we just hung out for the day. It was great. First time I met Larry, and I suppose it sparked my interest in U2, and we've sort of known each other ever since. So I used to get the bus to school with all the Mount Temple crowd, so I was kind of hearing what was going on there. And of course they had a bunch of bands down there. They had The Hype, well, Feedback, who became The Hype, who became U2. They had Virgin Prunes, the Modulators, who originally had been Frankie Corpse and the Undertakers. And there was two particular guys, two brothers, Neil and Ivan McCormick, who I got to know very well. And Neil was in class with Bono. And so I started going to gigs with them, and at one point U2, well, The Hype, did about 3 or 4 shows out here. They played the Marine, they played Suetonians, the Presbyterian Hall, and eventually the Community Centre. But I went along to the Marine, and funny enough, one of the songs they were doing was Don't Believe a Word by Thin Lizzy, which we were doing in my band. So I got to see, good comparison, the 2 young 16-year-old drummers in Dublin, on the north side, seeing each other. And he was much better than me. Really solid, almost a pro level in his metronomic approach, you know. So, as luck would have it, they started running gigs 100 yards from my house in the Howth Community Centre. Unfortunately, I don't. That's the best I can get. There's no pictures. I couldn't find any pictures of it before it was derelict, but it was great that, you know, there was these big rock gigs down the end of the road on a Friday night. And this is where I first saw these guys, Rocky De Valera and the Gravediggers. Local singer Ferdy McCanna. I'm sure many of you remember the McCannas living in Howth. But they were so loud, they were so exciting. They had smoke bombs. They brought smoke bombs to the community centre. I mean, it was just, you know, they did the whole rock thing. It was great. And for a young 16-year-old, it was like, that's what I want to do. I want to be there. And then I saw Jack. This is Jack Dublin. And we've been playing together. We've been playing together longer than I've been married, let's put it that way. And Jack was just so amazing. I couldn't wait to someday hopefully play with him. And there's the... I did eventually get to play support to them. And on the same night we had these guys. That's the Boy Scouts. They were Ireland's first all-female punk band. They played there. And there's the Modulators playing. So I'm on the bus with Neil one day, and he says... our drummer has stage fright. Eric Denny, remember Eric from up the hill? He said, and he's pulled out of our gig. We're supporting U2 and the Virgin Prunes this Friday night in the community centre. I said, but I'm not a punk. I'm a rocker. Like, I'm not. He said, you can learn this stuff. Come on. We'll pretend you're a punk for the night. So he dropped me down all vinyl. You know, the Buzzcocks, Fiction Romance, the Ramones, Blitzkrieg Bop, Sheen is a punk rocker. So I had to learn all these tunes off. And I got on really well with John, the bass player. Really funny guy. Lived in the village. And a friend of mine lives in his house now, actually. And so, yes, I didn't get home from school. I was in school in Coolock, and I wouldn't get home till about 5:30. So he said, we're sound checking at 5:30. I said, well, how am I going to get my kit down there for 5:30? He says, it's okay, I'll arrange it so you can use Larry's kit. Now, Larry had just bought this beautiful red Beverly kit that we were all really jealous of. And I was in the sound check, and Larry walked in, and I knew by the look of his face, uh-oh. I looked at Neil and said, what did you talk to? He says, well, I cleared it with Bono. And of course, you don't ask a singer if you can use the drummer's kit. Anyway, Larry was cool, and he ended up tuning my snare drum for me, and he's helped me out on numerous occasions when it comes to borrowing drums and stuff like that. So, anyway, so John, we did the Leaving Cert in 79, and John, you can see there pointing, he left the Modulators and put a band together with a bunch of guys from St. Fintan's. So Conor O'Farrell from Sutton, Chiefy O'Sullivan from Raheny, and myself there on the left. And then we went looking for a singer, and we found this guy in the Iron Jumper, like Conor Kelly, sort of an arty type from Rathfarnham. And he was also in College of Art as well, so he was the perfect choice, really. And funny enough, he was going out with a girl called Leslie Dowdall at the time, so that will come into play. So we were called Sounds Unreal. Terrible name, I know. There we are. We did some covers like Hey Joe by Hendrix, Vicious, Lou Reed, Don't Fear the Reaper, Psycho Killer, and Take Me to the River by Talking Heads. And we put together a live set, rehearsing in the cottage and in the stable. And we got chosen, we did some recording, we did a demo, and we got chosen to go on RTE's Young Line. And from that, we got chosen to be the subject of a documentary, a young people's documentary series for the EBU. And they named it after our song On a Wave. And it went all over Europe. I'm still trying to get a copy of it. And we got to pretend to be rock stars all over Dublin. We got to sit at the Summit Inn and be filmed drinking pints, and every time they turned around, we'd drink half our pints, so they had to keep filling them up for continuity. And we got to meet Dave Fanning and his producer Ian Wilson, who proved to be a very good contact to have. I still have his number. So the next band we want to look at is The Dark. So Sunday afternoons, Summit Inn. I'm sure you were there, Peter. Well, that's your photograph, actually. You go up on a sunny day and you go into the back and it'd be pitch dark, and there'd be this fantastic rock band playing. Joey Barry there on vocals, and Jerry and Peter Leonard with the guitar players, and Alex there, a lot of people remember from the Summit. So they did a lot of Doors covers and stuff, but they were just such brilliant musicians. There's Joey channeling his Jim Morrison look there. And Jerry, the first time I saw a Gibson SG was Jerry Leonard. And then they became the Spies. That's up in the Summit, I think. And they brought out a single called Thinking About the Song on Phaeton Records. And like the rest of us were making demos, but this, I think, was the first record to come out of Howth in quite a long time. So they were kind of trailblazers for us, a little bit older than us. And then you have the Fast Skirts. So we wanted to start playing our own gigs in the Summit, and we went up to Tommy Gaffney. Tommy said, well, you mightn't pull a crowd. He says, I have another band here, the Fast Skirts, and they mightn't pull a crowd. He says, if I put the two of you together, you might. So he gave us a residency in the winter on Wednesday nights at the Summit. We never pulled more than 30 people. And we used to be fighting over the fiver that we took on the door because it was 50p in or something. But we got to know Joey and Paul and Ray, and it was all just this whole thing of everybody getting to know each other, all the bands mixing. And eventually Tommy put us on with this summer disco, and that was great because the disco was packed with 200 or 300 people every Saturday night, and we got to come on and do an hour in the middle of it. And it was great, cutting your teeth, playing to a big crowd, playing totally the wrong music, but it didn't matter. We were playing, you know. We got to perform with we supported the Atrix in the project. They were sort of part of the Belfield scene, you know, with the Boomtown Rats. There's lots of bands coming out of the Belfield area as opposed to the Howth area. And we got to play Ireland's second anti-nuclear power show in Carnsore. The first one, a lot of people remember Carnsore 1 because Christy Moore played. But it went on for a few more years. We got to play in the second year. Jerry Leonard from the Spies drove us down. They had a big splitter bus. And funny story, actually, Chiefy, our keyboard player, decided to hang on. He didn't want to come home. And he stayed till the Saturday, and then he arrived home on the Saturday night, and himself and his mates had slept in their sleeping bags outdoors, and of course it was really sunny the next day, and they all slept. So they all came home with a white side of their face and a red side of their face. Just one of those funny things. But so that was where we were at, and actually headlining that night was a band called Tokyo Olympics, and you might recognize a few people in there. There's Joey Cashman again, and there's Sarge. Anybody who's seen The Guilty Party will know Sarge. So the other band I want to talk about then is Rev'd. So they were from Sutton, Andrew Bass, Stephen Bass, Dave Horner. And they were different to the rest of us because they were really into The Clash, so they were kind of already on this new wave trajectory. But Andrew was a singer-songwriter, which meant that they had a big repertoire of songs straight away, as opposed to the rest of us, like hacking away trying to write a song over a string of Saturday rehearsals, you know. Whereas Andrew could just come in with 3 or 4 songs and they'd bang them out. I got to play on lots of his demos over the years, and he's a really talented guy. There he is with his brother. Actually, I think we did a bill in the Summit with themselves and the McCormick brothers and ourselves, and somebody filmed it, and I'm still trying to get my hands on that. There is footage somewhere. So anyway, 1980, John and Chiefy leave the band, and I convinced Jack to leave the show band he's in called The Heartbeats. and join us. And knowing that with him on bass and Conor on guitar, we could really make a great sound, a great new sound. And we were very much into Echo and the Bunnymen. It almost looks like an Echo and the Bunnymen cover there. And we did more fanning sessions because we still had Ian Wilson's number. But we were now moving away from rock, and we were in that very much the post-punk, new wave sort of era in the music we were making. We got to support Echo and the Bunnymen in McGonagall's. And their drummer, Peter Freitas, was always one of my heroes, and I actually got to meet him a few times over the years. But that night, I actually lent him my Syndrome, which was the thing that used to go boo, boo, boo. But I used it for making these big explosion sounds, and so did he on a song called Zimbo. Do you remember Zimbo? And he borrowed it, and years later at a festival in Holland, we caught up about it, and he remembered, so that was nice. And we got to support the Teardrop Explodes in McGonagall's as well. So, then singer Conor left, because guitar player Conor Farrell from Sutton wanted to be the frontman, and we became a three-piece. And that was probably the best band I was ever in. It was sort of like Radiohead meets Hendrix. It's just incredible sound. And I really thought it was going places. I actually gave up veterinary medicine. I thought this was going to go so far. And then we started to add people in again. We brought in a friend of ours, Dara, on clarinet and sax, and then we brought in a mate of ours, Steve Wickham, on electric violin. And we went in with Jerry Leonard producing, went into town and recorded a single called Above the Thunderclouds. And just before we got it mixed, Conor decided he was going solo and moving to England, and that was the end. And we were kind of all left high and dry. So, what became of everyone? Well, Ray there on the left went into the tech centre. Sadly, we lost Paul Ainger last year. Many of you will remember that. Paul became like a world-class sound engineer. He toured for the Chieftains. He put all the sound system into Vicar Street, into the RDS. He toured into Anua all over Europe and England. He did nearly all the summit gigs I've ever put on, all the Son of Bland Slams, or Shane McGowan gigs, and he did 10 years of Christmas Hootenannies at half price for us up there, you know. He just loved coming back to Howth and doing sound for gigs. And then Joey Cashman, the Bell Joey. Well, Joey goes off after Tokyo Olympics and becomes the tour manager for the Pogues. And if ever there was a good partner for Shane, Joey was it. He becomes their tour manager, and then he eventually becomes Shane's manager and the Popes. That was the following band, the Popes manager. And they were also, they hung around with a guy in London called Joe Strummer from The Clash. And it was just, Anne reminded me of this the other day, that when our dear friend Bernie Dwyer, his mum, died, she was having the wake in her house up in Seaview Terrace, and about 12:30, 1 a.m, I got this phone call from Leo Rickard. He said, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm in bed." He says, "Get your bongos. Joe Strummer's at a session. He wants us to play." So I grabbed the bongos, ran around the corner, and we played all night with Joe Strummer. And just another little local connection there with Shane. You all know Joyce Redmond from St. Essence Terrace. So when Shane, one of the last big tours Shane did was with Sharon Shannon and Mundy, and Joyce was on that tour. She used to come out and do Fairy Tale every night, sing the Kirsty part and do the little dance at the end and stuff. So that's Joyce. Joyce actually is also the actual Galway Girl. The Galway Girl was written about Joyce. So there you go. So the Gravediggers. So what went on there? Well, Ferdia broke up the Rockadevil and the Gravediggers and formed Rockadevil and the Rhythm Kings. And they just seemed to top every festival through the 80s. They played all the big festivals. They were always up there as one of the headlines with all the big international bands. But what's interesting about this is the guy in the middle in the white jacket and the glasses, the bass player, that's Mark Clinton. He would eventually become Intunu's manager. Ferdia wrote a book called The Last of the High Kings, which got made into a movie with Gabriel Byrne, filmed in Howth. And then in 2004, he reformed the band and asked me to join. And we did lots of gigs, and of course he got us onto some TV stuff. There's us with Podge and Rog. And a nice write-up in the Irish Times there saying, baby boomers who won't grow up. That's us. That's most of us in this room, I think. So, the McCormicks. The modulators became Ivan and Neil. The guy looked with the big eyes in the middle, that's Deco Pete. He was the bass player. His dad was Pete's Electric in town. And Leo Regan there on the left, their drummer. He went on to become a very celebrated, award-winning documentary maker. So then Neil and Ivan formed Shook Up, a pop band, pop duo. And when they did the recordings, they asked Jack and I to come in and play drums and bass. But the recording studio was in a truck outside their house in Nashville Road. Anyone here from Nashville Road remember a big truck back in the 80s? It was called the Erie Mobile. And it was run by Peter Reeds, who had been in the Miami show band. Peter's played with everyone. But Peter's married to Ciara Mullen, who was Conor Mullen's cousin, or sister, Larry Mullen's cousin, so it's all, it's Howth, isn't it? But anyway, Neil goes on to write I Was Bono's Doppelganger, which becomes another Hollywood movie called Killing Bono, starring Robert Sheehan. He's the chief music and film critic for The Telegraph. And he has a new band called Limbonauts, who are well worth checking out. And funny enough, after all this time, Neil is now doing a lot of rock. And Neil was the punk. Things go full circle, don't they? And there's Ivan, his brother, who has the most successful wedding band in the UK called 29 Fingers. He also has a jazz pop band called MYHA, which I don't know much about. And then we're on to Andrew and Stephen, and there's David O'Neill in the back. So Rev'd, that's in Setonians actually. I know that's low ceiling anywhere. So Andrew actually ended up becoming in Tunu as guitar tech and toured with us for 2 or 3 years. By the end of it, he knew the guitar parts better than our guitar players, and he would eventually play with us. And he also, after the tour, he particularly liked one of my songs actually, called The Innocent and the Honest Ones, and after the tour, he changed the name of his band to The Innocent Ones. And there he is playing in the old Henry Grattan in town. And they were later joined by Yvonne McMahon on backing vocals, who's now Yvonne Tiernan, Tommy Tiernan's wife. And they then became Long Tall Stories. And now Andrew is, he owns the CEB, the Central Entertainment Bureau, which is the biggest pub band agency in the country. Any pubs, hotels, booking bands, they tend to go to Andrew because he does everything and it's all automated and stuff. He also has a studio called Oblivion Studios. And he's now got an online TV series with 2XM, that's the online RTE 2FM version. And he's got this TV show called Sessions from Oblivion. And the person producing it from is none other than Ian Wilson, who used to produce the Fanning shows, the Fanning Sessions. He also put together this rock band a few years ago called Muda, and they made this fantastic rock album. And it did nothing, but that's the way music is these days. You know, it either hits or it doesn't. But it's well worth looking at. Muda. If you come across it, it's well worth checking out. So this is where it all becomes a bit confusing. Bands breaking up and people going all over the place. So Conor comes back from London and he hitches up with Paul Cleary of the Blades, and they form the Partisans, and then they revert to becoming the Blades again. But he ends up playing with the Wilf brothers. Conor ends up playing guitar on the Commitments movie. So Glenn Hansard is miming to Conor's guitar playing all through the film. So it's not Glenn playing, it's Conor. He ends up playing with Terence Trent D'Arby, Toots and the Maytals. And years later, we put a studio together in town called Phonic Studios. And we produced numerous albums. Well, he produced numerous albums there. One in particular was Brona Gallagher, who he's now done 3 albums for, I think. So you'll start to see where it all starts to merge together now. So our ex-members, Dara and Chiefy, on the left there, get together with Joey and Jerry on the right from The Spies, and they perform Above the Thunderclouds, which was the name of a Deaf Actor song. Got all that? And then they morph into the Amazing Colossal Men, joined by the guy up the back on the right called Gareth Lee, who goes on to become the biggest producer in the world, produces all of Snow Patrol's albums, R.E.M's last album, a serious number of huge albums. He's still much in demand. And then they morph into Compulsion, a hard rock band, and they end up doing all these rock festivals all over Europe and become really big on this sort of underground rock circuit that you wouldn't hear of in the mainstream, but if you're into your hard rock, you probably have heard of them. You probably have their vinyl somewhere. So that's Joey, and then Jerry, the guitar player, who, you know, I've mentioned him about 100 times already. Jerry heads off to Copenhagen in '86 and meets an Irish guy called Donald Coughlin. And they start writing songs together. They come back to Dublin and they form Hinterland. And they make a couple of albums. But this album, Kissing the Roof of Heaven, it's always in the top 10 Irish albums of all time. It's a fantastic album. A little bit like the Blue Nile, but just a beautiful, beautiful album. And then Jerry heads off to New York. Where he performs, does his own stuff as Spooky Ghost. He's made 6 albums as Spooky Ghost. You'll find a couple of them on Spotify, but I think Jerry's more in the Bandcamp area where you have to order the CD so he can actually make a living. But while in New York, he starts to get noticed. And first person to notice him is Suzanne Vega. And to this day, he's still her right hand. He does all her shows. It's just the two of them. So if you see Suzanne Vega, you're going to see Jerry playing with her. But after Suzanne, he gets noticed by the man himself, David Bowie. So he becomes David Bowie's guitar player. And then he becomes David Bowie's MD and guitar player. And in fact, next month is the Dublin Bowie Festival. And every year, Joey puts together all these musicians who played with Bowie, and they come to Dublin. They were doing the Olympia every year, but it's got so big, I think they're moving it to the 3 Arena this year. And they get a lot of great Bowie sound-alike singers. But the band is Bowie's actual band. And it's an amazing show and well worth seeing. So, now we're on to Intuanua and how this all comes together for me. I'm just going to skip through Intuanua quickly because it's too long a story, but it is all on intuanua.com. The whole story is there if you want to go and check it out. So it starts with a couple of guys, Ivan O'Shea. A lot of you remember Eddie, the electrician. This is Eddie's son, Ivan. So Ivan was always knocking around. He was on the bus with myself and the McCormicks every morning going to school because he used to be a swimmer. And he'd have been swimming, gone home to Howth, had his breakfast. He always had wet hair on the bus going back to school because he'd already been to school. So we got to know each other really well on the bus, and he always came to the Modulators rehearsals and to the Deaf Actor rehearsals, bringing lots of technology. He'd have the odd guitar, but he wasn't really a player. He was a techie guy. You know, he had all the toys that guitar players loved, and he ended up landing himself a job in Eamon Andrews Studios. People probably remember the name, but it was actually tiny. It's really tiny. And they asked me to put some drums on a couple of the tracks, and there I am in the tiny, literally the recording room is this tiny bit bigger than the drum kit. So the band was called Vis-a-Vis. It was Ivan, this guy Martin Clancy, and a singer called Miriam Blennerhassett. And Miriam's dad was Canon Blennerhassett in this very church. But pretty soon, she was told she couldn't continue. She was in opera school, and you're not allowed to be in a band. So this sort of band, which wasn't really a band, they'd never played a gig. They had a 4-track, and they used to write tunes in their bedroom on a 4-track. So, but because Ivan was so good at technology, he got me in on drums, and he got Steve Wickham in on violin, then he got Dara in on sax and clarinet, and then he got Jack in on bass. Even Nolene O'Byrne, I remember, played flute on it, and with loads of people from around Howth and Sutton played on these demos. It was just like a big co-op of Howth musicians that Ivan and Martin were pulling together from all these bands that had broken up. But we no singer. So, Jeanette, as some of you might know, had Sinead O'Connor singing at her wedding. And the night before the wedding at the rehearsal, I just happened to have a tape of one of the tracks we'd written, which had no vocals. And I went up to her after hearing her sing and said, would you be interested in singing? And the rest is history. She sang on it. And we sort of introduced Sinead, I suppose, to the recording world. Ivan, on the other hand, had just recorded a band called The Assembly, who had this great singer called Leslie Dowdall. And he brought a track to her, and she sang on that, and the two of them got together and wrote lyrics for that. So we now had these two tapes, these early demos with two different singers. And I'm actually going to give you a little clip, but I just want to say, first of all, if it wasn't for Jeanette looking after Sinead in the home she was in and buying her first guitar, chances are I wouldn't have met her. She wouldn't have had this fast track into the music business, and we mightn't have had Sinead O'Connor. So I just think we'll give Jeanette a round of applause. So I'll give you a little clip. So this was the track with Jerry Leonard producing again. Just a bit conscious that we might run out of time, and I want to give you a little clip of this one. So the other track we gave to Leslie. Which is, you can see, this is where the Into Nua sound really starts to come together. Jerry liked his effects on drums. So that was the emergence of the Into Nua sound with the pipes and the violins. Shameless plug, Leslie's playing on the Sunday the 2nd of March in the Abbey Tavern as part of this new festival, All Shucked Up. All Shucked Up. So, Into Nua Mark 1. There's how many there? There's 7 there. Steve is missing, but that's the first photograph of the band. The guy in the middle is Vinnie Kilduff. So we're working away, writing songs, rehearsing, and Steve was at a bus stop down in Fairview one night, and he sees The Edge, and he goes up to him and says, "I'd like to play on your album." And The Edge says, "Okay, come on into the studio tomorrow." So Stephen ends up playing the violin on Sunday Bloody Sunday, which is, obviously such a huge, huge song. And then he gets asked to do the Irish tour with them a few months later. And on the tour, they have Vinnie Kilduff, who played pipes on their second album. And the two of them become great buddies, and Stephen arrives home from the tour and says, I've got somebody new for the band, Vinnie Kilduff. So suddenly we have this Celtic multi-instrumentalist with a name like Intuinu, and everyone thinks we're a Celtic rock band, but we weren't. We just added these sounds into what we were doing already. It was just the blend of this whole new approach to music that we'd all come through, you know. And back to the cottage again. There we are, the gang of us hanging outside the cottage on a nice warm summer. And actually the guy over on the far left is Randy Blazak. We got to know him through Stephen's first wife, Babs. They were all from Atlanta, Georgia, and they were part of that REM gang. So Randy was great at linking Steve in with all these big international bands. And his name will come up again. So we write a load of songs that summer of '83, and by September we're ready to a gig, and our very first gig is on the back of a truck on Howth Harbour. Anybody at the little festival? It was organised by the late Colm Reid. Do you remember Colm Reid? So Colm organised this festival. There's Dara and Vinnie, and there's Steve and Dara again, and then we followed up with a gig at the Summit. And then a couple of gigs in the TV club in town and an Irish tour that we lost our shirts on. But, you know, that's what you do. So I'm just going to go through Intuinu very quickly here. We then, within a year, we had released a single on U2's label, Mother Records. We were Mother Records 001. We signed a record with Island Records, signed a deal with Island Records, who sent us off with some very dodgy photographers. And that same summer we supported Bob Dylan in Slane. Excuse the haircut. Lots of cymbals. Do I have enough, do you think? And Leslie and Steve get invited on stage later on with Bob and Bono and Van Morrison and a whole plethora of us. And there we are in Windmill Lane recording our first EP. It's a long story after that, and as I say, it's on the website, but suffice to say, after finishing the album, Steve leaves the band, joins the Waterboys. We end up doing 4 albums. We get 2 different record deals, we get 3 different violinists, 2 different pipers, 3 different guitars, and we broke up in 1989. So what next? So myself and Ray had planned our wedding for the 25th of September 1989. We were in LA all that summer recording, and we came home at the start of September. The band broke up. So we went ahead and got married, as you probably know. So what to do next? Well, towards the end of Intuinu, Martin Clancy and myself had kind of evolved into being the songwriting team for the band. We'd written all the songs for the last 2 albums. Not because we were better at songwriting, but because we weren't lazy, really. We just got together every day and we worked and produced loads of songs, and I don't think the others could really keep up with the pace. So we formed Sugar Candy Mountain, but we couldn't really do anything because we still had these huge debts with Virgin Records and our publishers. It was first past the post. Whoever brought out a successful record was paying off all the debts. So we were selling cassettes at gigs, and we did a charity single there, Do You Know What Hurts the Children, which did quite well. It actually charted for Childline. Actually, at the launch of that single, Sinead came up to me and said, "Why didn't you ask me to sing on it?" I said, "Well, you still can. You can sing on the international release." So Sinead came into the studios and we recorded it. But I think Childline had spent their budget at this point, and they weren't ready to go with another release, because releasing costs almost more money than recording, to be honest. But I do have a recording at home of myself and Sinead duetting on that song. I then wanted to put the fun back into music, so I joined this crowd. They used to play at the Cock on a Sunday night, the Texas Kellys. Martin O'Keefe from Bayside was the main guy there with Jimmy Kelly. They used to pack the Cock Tavern out every Sunday night, which is now the Harbour Bar for any blow-ins. And I joined in, and we started just packing the place out so much. I rang Louis Walsh, who had been Intuinu as agent, and I said, "Come out and have a look at us, Louis." And this was around the time of the Flower Cowboys and a lot of these bands that were doing really well. So Louis said, "Go and take some photographs with cowboy hats, and I'll have you booked out 6 nights a week." And that's exactly what happened. We went up, that's the quarry up in Howth. We went up there, put on the hats. And I had 2 great years. I mean, I made more money playing with the Texas Kellys than I'd made in 10 years with Intuinu, to be honest. In Tuanua, we were on £50 wage a week from the record company, and with Tex Achilles, we were making £100 a night. So when you're used to living on £50 a week, £100 a night, 4 or 5 nights a week is huge, huge money. So back to in Tuanua. 2004, I got everybody together for a booze up in town, and we all buried the hatchets after the big breakup. And we did a gig on Easter Sunday 2004 in the Beta Court, and it was great. It was packed. So the three that reformed are Leslie, Jack, and myself. So the rhythm section and the singer. So we've had lots of different guitar players since. We've had so many different bands since the Reformation. One of them was Andrew Bass from Rev'd. But just to say that, you know, we've kept it going on and off over the years, and it kind of climaxed in 2023 with our 40th anniversary tour, and we played with Lionel Richie and the Human League in St. Anne's at the big festival there. So that was a highlight. I also set up a studios in town, and I set it up with the late Derek Cronin, fabulous guy, great sound engineer, piano player. And eventually Derek left and Connor came in. Connor had a studio in town, but he had no premises. He'd lost his premises, and I said, well, I've got a premises and you've got great gear. So, and that went great. We did lots of recordings there, and that's actually Stephen Ryan from the Drays. We did an album called The Drays with Stephen Ryan. We both played on the whole album. At the end of it, Stephen Ryan said, I've decided it's not going to be a solo album, it's going to be an album, a band album. I want to call it The Drays, and I want you to be in it. So we ended up touring for a couple of years with Stephen in The Drays. Stephen had been in a very famous band called the Stars of Heaven, who were John Peel's favourite band. So mixing with royalty. I got into management for a while and managed 2 different Howth bands, the Von Shakes and the Capitals. I managed Von Shakes until they went off to America, and I managed the Capitals until they came to their leaving cert here. Brought out an album in 2014, Cruel and Tender Ways. You can get the CD on Bandcamp, or you can stream it anywhere. And another thing that happened to me was my cousin there in the middle, Garrod Lee. So when Shane McGowan came back from England, he was living up in the Deer Park here. Himself and Joey Cashman from the Fastskirts, and Sarge, who you've seen along the way. And Garrod was their driver. And they were in the Summit one night, and Shane said he wanted to put together a punk rock band. Who would they get on drums? And Garrod said, well, it has to be Paul, he's only down the road. And then when they asked me who we get on bass, I said, well, it has to be Jack, we've been playing together for 40 years. So we ended up, myself and Jack ended up in playing with Shane McGowan in the Shane Gang. For 2 years, we did about 10 shows around Ireland and England, and the first show we ever did was in the Summit, because I said to them, do you want to do a warm-up in Howth? And of course, it ended up being huge, because people from all over the world wanted to see the first gig by Shane's new band, so there was people buying tickets from Canada and everything, and we had about, I don't know, we had too many people in the Summit that day. It was absolutely, we had to put barriers in front of the stage, it was so round. But it was great to have such a huge personality play in the Summit, you know, bringing it all back home. And then after 2 years of this, Shane just stopped turning up to rehearsals. He kind of lost interest, lost confidence, I think, more than anything. But we kept going because we just put this great band together. So we just swapped in Frank for Shane, and we became the Guilty Party, and we've been playing since 2010. And we are the backing band for all the Christmas hootenannies, and this is back to the Summit, back to Tommy Gaffney again. Tommy, who gave me my first ever gigs in the Summit, then, you know, there's a story behind this. The hootenanny was a gig. After this first gig with Shane, we thought, let's get him for Christmas, and I had booked a load of shows into the Summit for that Christmas, one of them being Shane, and then the day before Shane said, I'm not coming. So Tommy said, well, you've got loads. Howth, he said, you've got the lights, you've got the PA, you've got the band, all you're missing is singers, and Howth's full of singers, as you know. So I made some phone calls, Jeanette being one of them, and we've got loads of singers, and we had this great night. We called it the Hootenanny, and it's been going ever since. And the great thing about it was, after an absence from the Summit of 5 years, we've been nomadic, we've been Setonians. This year, the Summit got their venue back together, and we had it in the Summit. And what's funny about this picture is the guy in the middle with the Long Live Rock and Roll is Neil McCormick from the Modulators. 2022 I released a single, but I don't really get much time for recording these days because this is what I'm doing now. I'm running festivals. Again, roped in by Tommy. Tommy had started the Howth Jazz and Blues Festival and was finding it difficult. Could I take it over? Yes, but we don't want any jazz bands because nobody drinks at the jazz gigs and it's beer sponsorship. So I said, well, I'm not running a festival called Howth Jazz and Blues. I'll change the name to Howth Roots and Blues. And then, would you run a trad festival? So yes, and then I changed the name of that to Fela Benader to kind of give it more of a localized name. And now this year we're bringing on, next month we've got a new festival coming on. This was Dara Hegney's idea from the Harbour Bar to have an oyster festival. So it's all shucked up and we have some great bands. We've got the Frank and Walters are coming and Ryan Sheridan, the Henry Girls, Leslie. So it's going to be a great little festival. So I suppose, you know, one of the things that strikes me when I go back to all the photographs is, you know, I always come back to this photograph on the right here. You're from 30 people on a Wednesday night in the Summit. I'm now running festivals that bring crowds this size to the Summit. And that gives me a great buzz, because it was always the hardest place to get people to go to. And it still is, but, you know, you have to support venues, because the venues around Ireland are disappearing. Worldwide, venues are vanishing. There's nowhere for bands to play. And if you can't play, there'll be no bands. You have to get out and support live music if you want bands. If you want there to be bands, you know. Or else they'll all end up just on their computers putting music onto Spotify, you know. So, yeah, that's it. I was going to say, yeah, from having a place to rehearse, place to perform, and having these local venues meant that the bands all got to meet each other too, which is another, as you can see from that story, how everybody interacted, you know. And of course we all drank together at the Summit Inn, which had something to do with it. And maybe the beach parties had something to do with it. You know, there was just something about Howth. I don't know, we can talk about it in a minute, but there was definitely something about Howth that you know, made us all want to ride this wave of new music and new creativity that all happened post the punk revolution of '77. You know, people who'd been playing rock for years just gave it up and went into the whole new, you know, a new approach to music. You know, who would have thought Jack and I would be experimenting with uilleann pipes? But there you go. This is what happened. Creativity, you know. So thank you for listening, and thank you to all the people I borrowed photographs from, Peter and David O'Shea, if you're watching, and any of the Facebook pages I took off. Thanks for coming, and the people online. Thanks for coming and listening to an old rocker reminisce. Thank you very much. I just have one little thing to show you if you want. Have we time for one little video? Have we time for one little video? Yeah. So in 2012, Intuitive got asked to play Electric Picnic, which, you know, having been broken up for years and come back and done a few gigs, to get asked to do the picnic was a big thing. So, of course, we hired a video crew. So, a blast of this before we go. Also, about this, when we were writing this song, we didn't know what to do with it, and Martin Clancy turned around one day and he said, why don't you use that Def Actor drum and bass riff that you used to have? And it's the only time we ever took something from Def Actor and put it into a new, and I think it worked.
we've just time for a few quick questions. Anybody want to say anything, reminisce, mention anything? Huh?
Yeah, great presentation, Paul. It was terrific.
Thanks, Mick.
It was great to see the amount of musicians that actually came from Howth and others that came into Howth. And then, I don't know if anybody heard Mark Little last Saturday was on Brendan O'Connor's show, and he was talking about the cultures around music and the clashes between how the rock, the hippie era was a kind of revolutionary era, and then the punks revolted against that. But I think there was a kind of commonality of spirit that went through all the bands, and they all met in at that point. You could say the commonality was the music, just music itself. They eventually came around to each other's music.
I think most of the bands a lot of the bands that I was in, the people I knew, we kind of came from the hippie thing, but the punk thing kicked us into the new wave thing.
Yeah. And then the other thing I was going to say is that how musicians kind of moved from one scene into another. Like the bands that were playing when you first came into Howth were Easy Street and the Rhythm Kings. You mentioned them yourself earlier. But the drummer in Easy Street was Joe Reid from St. Peter's Terrace. And Joe learned his trade with the Howth pipe band. And Larry Mullen learned his trade with the Post Office Workers Band.
That's right.
So it's amazing how musicians can carry that spirit right through everything. It's like a centrifugal force of what they do. So.
Yeah, funny enough, when I left the Texas Kellys, the drummer that followed me in was a drummer from the Howth Pipe Band.
Anyone else want to say something or comment or have a question? Yeah.
Well, I remember playing in Tuanua. We were on an Irish tour, and we finished up in what was then the Royal. And I remember getting up on stage and looking down. It was absolutely packed, and everybody was standing. But there was one person at the back taller than everyone else, and that was Philo. Leslie would have known him a lot better now, because she was going out with John O'Rourke, who was the lifeguard on something on Burrow Beach. So I wasn't part of that sort of set, really. But I've got to know Gus since then, who was Philip's tour manager. He taught both my sons how to drive. Gus Curtis, yeah. Is Gus here now? Yeah.
Any comments, anyone?
And of course, Phil ended up playing with Clonader, with Leo and all the gang, just before Intuno broke up. But I ended up doing a lot of recording with all of them. I did an EP with, I produced, sang and played on an EP with Leo. And I also produced the album for Bull and the Benader Buccaneers, which we recorded in a house. So I was very involved in the trad scene as well, but I wasn't going to go into it in this one because there was like another hat,
I think you should write a book. Someone needs to document the genealogy of all the music that has come out of Howth and the link between everybody. Anyone else want to comment or ask a question? Yeah.
Just again, it's before the period you covered, Paul, but Van Morrison's Veed and Fleece album. A lot of that was rumoured to be composed while he was staying at Sutton Castle, and the cover of the album is from Sutton Castle.
I did not know that. That's amazing. That's amazing. One for the book.
Music facts we can write down.
And of course, Neil Young famously stayed in Howth as well.
Mm. His father lived in Howth. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Aren't we great?
Don't know what it is in the water. Anyone else? Anybody want to make a comment or have any reminiscing? Other stories we don't know about?
It's kind of what this man was asking about Thin Lizzy, and when Phil died, the Cock Tavern became the place of pilgrimage for any big bands that came to Ireland to play. They'd all come out to the Cock to, drink where Phil drank. And one night it was Guns N' Roses were there, and there was some old guy sitting up at the bar, and he goes, "Which one of yous is slush?" So that's my little memory.
Anyway, I don't think we got to the bottom of why this whole wave happened, but I have to say, coming to Howth as a kid, it just changed my life completely.
I think there's something to do with the shape of it's the village as well, and you all used to meet up because you had to get the bus. You're all in the village at different things.
The bus,
a small
could
community.
be down to all getting the bus and the link with all the Mount Temple kids and all the stuff that was going on there. Drinking in the summit.
There was a centre for it.
Underage drinking at the summit might have had something to do with it.
I don't want to hear that.
Getting in to see the Spies when I was 16.
Listen, I had to live in the house with a drummer.
No, just a small comment, like what is it about Howth? Yeah, well, it is a peninsula and people are type of stuck together there. But I think even Phil Lynott, I mean, if I know that story right, he more came to Howth because of music here rather than bringing it here, because he came to jam with people out here and play with people and so on. And so there's always been all types of music in Howth, opera singers and any type of music you want, traditional music. So, and it's quite unusual now. I mean, it's quite extraordinary. There's nowhere else in Dublin like
it's a cluster.
The amount of music that goes on in it, and that continues to go on in it, not least due to Paul's own work organising these fabulous events that we have every summer now.
Yeah, sorry, have we got the Clancy Brothers, Barney? Wasn't he here way back? He sang in the Abbey Tavern, yeah? Way back. Yeah, and I remember with the Eurovision Song Contest here years ago. And I remember Frank Hendy, he was taking his boat out. He used to bring the sailors out to their bigger boats, see the small, he was the punt man. But he was never surrounded by so many lovelies as he was that day. All beamed all over the world. But the Clancy Brothers were the heart here. Way down, they sang the Abbey all the time, I think, way back.
There's pictures of them there.
Yeah, Bob Dylan's favourite band.
Yeah. And of course, just my reminiscing, of course, Sinead O'Connor made her debut in Howth, her first ever public performance, in the Church of the Assumption. First time she ever sang in public. And if you've seen the documentary, Nothing Compares, you'll see the footage and you'll know the story from that.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't go into any detail about Sinead because it's all in it. We were interviewed extensively for that documentary, Nothing Compares, and you can get it on
It's
Netflix.
on Sky documentaries. Yeah, so we were sort of advising on it because, well, obviously Sinead and I went back a long time. That's another story. Anything else? No? Well, I think it's
Gary,
a different
have you
sort of
two
lecture.
questions?
Yeah. It's a different sort of lecture tonight, but we just thought, now you've seen it, the music heritage, and that's only a fraction of it. As you say, there was the Clancy Brothers, there's the whole trad, and then there's composers, writers who've always been inspired all the way back to even Yeats, and so many lyrical artists who've lived out here, and novelists. So it's such a creative space, and I think we need to protect that by keeping venues open and having these festivals, which I was going to say, it's encouraging the new generation of Howth artists. We've got you've Luke Howard,
I tried to give the Howth artists a leg up. So, for example, we have Ryan Sheridan, who's a big act. He's opening the Friday night of the festival, the next festival. He's on 28th of February up at the Summit. But Aaron Finn, who is a singer-songwriter who wouldn't be able to pull a crowd by himself, is going to open for Ryan Sheridan, so he gets seen. John Brennan's kids are supporting Scullion on the Friday night. And so that getting them supports in front of these big acts is how I try to help the local.
And the artists love coming here. Sharon Shan loved last year. Scullion loved coming here. So they do love the vibe and they love being here.
Oh, they want to come back. Yeah,
and they all want to come back. So we've got to keep
You're
it
the best
going.
audiences in the country. Yeah, but they
There you go.
say that to everyone.
And live music, got to keep live music for artists because there's no income on Spotify, there's no income on streaming, the income is live gigs. And if we want to keep a tradition and keep encouraging musicians for the future, we've got to have live venues and festivals. So there you go. Thanks all very much, and thank you for... I can't see, I haven't got my glasses. Can you turn them up? I can't see.
I can't. Can you see that? Where that?
Red. Yeah, but red and brown.
was Andy and Andy's son Jeremy was watching. So I hope the streaming worked okay. Would it be? I must get those the PowerPoint. Would it be possible to get that? We need to lock up here as well. But that's Paul's laptop, isn't it? And cables, isn't it?
Is the sound off? Make sure the sound is switched off, is it? No, yeah, it is off. It is off. Okay. Jerry, you have to turn the sound off.
Okay.
You have to turn off the main sound.